Greg told me he was breaking ground for a koi pond at 2 a.m., but you don't line a koi pond with heavy-duty trash bags and quicklime. My neighbor Bertie saw the truth. Instead of calling the cops immediately, I decided to play a game. I told Greg a lie about buried gold, and then I watched him dig until he broke. Hello ladies, Mary here. They say that love is blind, but I think that is too generous. Love is not blind. Love is simply choosing to look away. We see the cracks in the plaster, but we hang a pretty picture over them. We smell the smoke, but we tell ourselves it is just someone barbecuing down the street. We do this because the alternative is admitting that we let a stranger into our house and gave him the keys to the safe. Alice was a woman who had it all. She had a thriving business, she had a beautiful home, and she had a husband nearly 20 years her junior who looked like he walked out of a cologne commercial. She thought she had won the lottery. She didn't realize she had actually purchased a demolition crew. My name is Alice. I am 52 years old and I am an interior designer. I spend my days making chaos look elegant. I take empty rooms and fill them with warmth and texture. I am good at spotting flaws in a floor plan, but apparently I am terrible at spotting flaws in a man. I met Greg 11 months ago. He was 34. He was charming. He had a smile that made me forget I had sworn off marriage after my first husband passed away. Greg was everything my late husband was not. He was spontaneous. He was passionate. He was unemployed, but he called himself an entrepreneur. I told myself it didn't matter. I had enough money for both of us. It started on a Tuesday night in October. The air was crisp and the windows were cracked open just an inch to let in the autumn breeze. I woke up at 2 in the morning. I am a light sleeper. The slightest sound wakes me. A dripping faucet. A settling floorboard, but this sound was different. It was a rhythmic wet thud, schluck, thud, schluck, thud. I rolled over. The other side of the bed was empty. The sheets were cold. Greg was gone. I put on my silk robe and walked to the window that overlooked the backyard. The moon was full and bright. It cast long silver shadows across the lawn. I paid a landscaping crew $500 a month to maintain. And there in the middle of my pristine zoysia grass was Greg. He was shirtless. His skin glistened with sweat even though it was 45 degrees outside. He was holding a shovel. He was digging a hole near the back fence right under the old weeping willow tree. I tapped on the glass. Greg froze. He looked up at the window. For a second his face was a mask of pure terror. Then he saw it was me and the terror melted instantly into that boyish grin I fell in love with. He waved. He stuck the shovel in the dirt and jogged toward the back door. I met him in the kitchen. He smelled like wet earth and exertion. He was wiping his hands on a rag. "Baby, go back to sleep," he said, kissing my forehead. "I didn't mean to wake you." "Greg, what on earth are you doing?" I asked, tightening my robe. "It is 2 in the morning. You are digging a hole in the yard." "It is a surprise," he said, his eyes twinkling. "I know how much you love that Japanese aesthetic. I decided to build you a koi pond. I couldn't sleep, so I thought I would break ground." A koi pond, it was a sweet idea. It was thoughtful. But something about it felt off. Who digs a pond at 2 in the morning? Who digs a pond without checking for gas lines or water pipes? "You are crazy," I said, but I smiled. "You are going to catch pneumonia. Come to bed." He washed his hands in the sink. I watched the dark water swirl down the drain. He scrubbed his fingernails with a brush until they were raw. He was meticulous. He was always meticulous. The next morning the neighborhood alarm clock went off. Her name was Bertie. Bertie was 75 years old and lived in the yellow bungalow next door. She was the neighborhood character. She wore mismatched shoes. She screamed at the mailman. She claimed the government was spying on her through her toaster. Greg hated her. He said she drove down property values. I was drinking my coffee when I heard the screeching. I looked out the front window. Bertie was standing on the property line screaming at our hydrangeas. "Devils," she shrieked, pointing a bony finger at my house. "Devils in the dirt. I see you. I see the black plastic." Greg stormed into the living room. He was wearing his running shorts. I am going to call the police on that old hag, he snapped. She is insane, Alice. She is going to hurt someone. Don't call the police, Greg, I said soothingly. She is harmless. She just has episodes. I will go talk to her later. He glared at me. His eyes were cold, colder than I had ever seen them. You are too soft, Alice, he said. That is your problem. You let people walk all over you. One day that woman is going to snap, and I don't want to be here when she does. He grabbed his keys and left for the gym. Or at least he said he was going to the gym. I finished my coffee. I felt unsettled. Devils in the dirt. It was just nonsense. Bertie was always yelling about devils. I went to the front door to get the mail. As I opened it, I heard a rustling in the bushes. I looked down. There was a single white envelope on the doormat. It didn't have a stamp. It didn't have an address. It just had my name written in shaky cursive. Alice. I picked it up. I looked around. The street was empty. Bertie's house was silent. The curtains were drawn tight. I went inside and locked the door. I sat on the stairs and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper. The handwriting was not shaky. It was firm. It was sharp. It was the handwriting of a woman who was perfectly in control of her faculties. Alice, I am not crazy. I act crazy because it is the only way men like your husband ignore me. They think I am a ghost. They think I am senile. So they do things in front of me that they would never do in front of a witness. Your husband is not building a koi pond. Koi ponds are not lined with heavy-duty tarps and quicklime. I saw what he put in the shed last night before he started digging. Check your security cameras. Check the timestamp from 1:30 this morning. Do not let him know you know. If you confront him now, you will end up in that hole. Burn this note. Bertie. I stared at the note until the words blurred. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Quicklime. I knew what quicklime was. It wasn't for gardening. It was for decomposition. It was for hiding evidence. I walked to the kitchen sink and held the corner of the note under the lighter I use for candles. I watched the paper curl into black ash and wash down the drain. Burn this note. I had followed instructions. Now I was alone. I went to my office. I locked the door. I sat down at my computer and pulled up the home security app. Greg had installed the system himself a month after we got married. He said he wanted me to feel safe. He said the neighborhood was changing. He put cameras everywhere. The front porch, the driveway, the backyard. I scrolled back to 1:30 a.m. The screen was grainy and black and white. I saw Greg walk out of the back door. He wasn't holding a shovel yet. He was carrying 2 large heavy bags over his shoulders. He walked to the garden shed. I switched to the shed camera. Greg had installed one inside, claiming he wanted to protect his expensive tools. I watched him enter the shed. He dropped the bags. The label on the bag was visible for a split second before he kicked it into the corner. Hydrated lime. He then reached into a box on the shelf. He pulled out a roll of thick black plastic sheeting, the kind contractors use, and a roll of duct tape. He didn't look like a man planning a water feature. He looked like a man planning a disposal. He stood there for a moment staring at the wall, and then he did something that chilled me to the bone. He smiled. He practiced a smile in the reflection of the window glass. He adjusted his face from a blank stare to a warm, loving grin. He held it for 3 seconds, then let it drop back to nothing. He was rehearsing. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't feel my fingers. I looked out the window at the hole in the yard. It was about 3 feet deep now, just deep enough to be suspicious, but shallow enough to be explained away. He was going to kill me. The realization didn't come with tears. It came with nausea. He was going to kill me for the life insurance policy I had signed 3 months ago. $2 million. He had suggested it. Just in case something happens to you, Alice, I want to be able to keep the house. I thought it was romantic. I thought he loved the house because it was our home. I stood up. I needed to leave. I needed to pack a bag and run. But then I remembered Bertie's note. If you confront him now, you will end up in that hole. If I ran, he would find me, or worse, he would charm his way back in. He would say I was having a breakdown. He would gaslight me until I believed the lime was for the lawn and the tarp was for painting. I heard the front door open. Greg was back. Alice, he called out. Babe, I picked up donuts. Donuts. He brought donuts to the woman he was planning to bury. I looked in the mirror. I slapped my cheeks to bring color back into them. I practiced the smile just like he had practiced his. "In here, honey," I called back. My voice sounded thin but steady. He walked into the office. He was sweaty, glowing with health and malice. "You look pale," he said, frowning. He touched my cheek. His hand was warm. It felt like a branding iron. "Are you okay?" "Just a headache," I lied. "I think I need some protein." "I got you an old-fashioned," he said, handing me the bag. "Your favorite." I took the bag. I looked at him. I looked at the man who slept next to me every night. "Greg," I said. "About the pond." "Yeah," he bit into a glazed donut. "I'm thinking of making it deeper, maybe 5 feet, so the fish have room to swim in the winter." 5 feet. The depth of a grave. "That sounds wonderful," I said, but I was thinking, if we are going to dig up the yard anyway, maybe we should look for it. Greg stopped chewing. "Look for what?" I leaned in. I lowered my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "The box," I said. "My father's box." Greg's eyes narrowed. "Your father, he died 10 years ago. What box?" "I never told you," I whispered, looking at the door as if checking for spies, because it is technically illegal. But my father didn't trust banks. He didn't trust the IRS. Before he died, he liquidated a Swiss account. $2 million in gold bars. He buried it in the backyard, Greg. Right under the willow tree. Greg went completely still. The donut fell from his hand onto the desk. "Gold," he whispered. $2 million? Yes, I lied. I never dug it up because I was afraid of the tax implications. But if you are already digging... I saw the change in his eyes instantly. The murder plan evaporated. It was replaced by something else. Pure unadulterated greed. "Show me where," he said. "Show me exactly where." There are 2 things in this world that make men lose their minds faster than anything else. One is a beautiful woman, and the other is free money. Greg already had the woman, and he was planning to dispose of her. But the money? That was a different story. Greed is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs the conscience, but more importantly, it numbs common sense. When I told Greg about the gold, I saw the exact moment the murder switch in his brain turned off, and the treasure hunter switch turned on. Greg stared at me. The half-eaten donut lay forgotten on the floor. His pupils had dilated so wide his eyes looked black. $2 million, he croaked. In gold bars? Yes, I whispered, wringing my hands to look nervous. Daddy was eccentric. He didn't trust the government. He bought it in Zurich in '98. He smuggled it back in pieces. Greg stood up. He began to pace the small office. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking through the walls, imagining a life of luxury that didn't involve waiting for a life insurance payout. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Alice, we have been struggling. I could have started my business. We could have." "Why?" "Because I was scared," I cried, throwing a little wobble into my voice. "Daddy said if the IRS found out, I would go to prison." "He said they scan for sudden wealth," I thought. "I thought if we just left it there, it would be safe." Greg grabbed my shoulders. His grip was tight, desperate. "It is safe," he said intensely, "but it's useless in the dirt." "Alice, where is it?" "Exactly where?" I closed my eyes. I pretended to think. I needed to pick a spot that was difficult, a spot that would break his back. "He buried it at night," I said slowly. "I remember watching from my bedroom window. It wasn't under the willow tree. No, I was wrong. It was closer to the old septic tank, near the azaleas." "The azaleas," Greg repeated. He looked out the window. That's where the ground is full of clay and roots. Yes, I said. He wanted it to be hard to find. He put it deep, Greg, 6 feet down, in a lead line box so metal detectors wouldn't pick it up. Lead line, Greg muttered. Smart. He looked at me. The adoration was back, but it was twisted now. He didn't love me. He loved that I was the map. I have to get it, he said. Tonight, no. Now. I'll tell the neighbors I'm expanding the pond project. But Greg, I said, grabbing his arm, it's so much work. You can't dig that deep by yourself. Watch me, he said. He ran out of the room. I heard the back door slam. I walked to the window. Greg was already at the shed. He dragged out the shovel, a pickaxe, and a wheelbarrow. He marched to the azalea bed. A patch of ground I knew was riddled with thick, stubborn roots from an oak tree we cut down years ago. He struck the ground. Clang. The earth was hard as rock. He didn't care. He swung again, and again. I let out a breath I had been holding for 20 minutes. I was safe, for now, as long as he thought the gold was down there. He needed me alive to confirm the location. I went to the kitchen. I made myself a sandwich. I forced myself to eat. I needed strength. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. He took the bait. I see him sweating, good girl. It was Bertie. I looked out the kitchen window toward her house. The curtains in her living room moved just a fraction. I texted back. How long do I have? Bertie's reply came instantly. Until he hits bottom and finds nothing. Then he will be angry. Make the hole deep, Alice. Make him tired. I watched Greg for an hour. He was an animal. He ripped out my prize-winning azaleas with his bare hands. He hacked at the roots. He was covered in dirt, his expensive gym shoes ruined. He was digging a pit, a massive jagged wound in the earth. At noon, he came inside for water. He looked manic. I'm down 3 feet, he panted, chugging a glass of water. I haven't hit the box yet. Are you sure it's there? I'm sure, I said, sitting at the island, looking through a magazine I wasn't reading. Daddy said where the pink flowers bloom. That has to be the azaleas. Greg wiped his mouth. Okay. Maybe it's deeper, you said 6 feet? At least, I said, maybe 7. He was a paranoid man, Greg. 7 feet, Greg muttered. I need a bigger shovel. He ran back out. I went to my office computer. I logged into our bank accounts. Greg didn't know I had the passwords to his private accounts. He thought he was slick. I checked the balances. Our joint savings $50,000. His personal checking $400. His credit cards maxed out. $35,000 in debt. He was broke. That's why he was killing me. He was drowning in debt and I was his life raft. I opened a new tab. I logged into my primary investment account, the one with the bulk of my wealth. I initiated a transfer, not to him, to a secure offshore trust my lawyer had set up for me years ago during my first marriage. Then I looked at the joint savings, $50,000. It wasn't much compared to my net worth, but it was enough to buy a getaway car. I transferred it all, every penny. I sent it to Bertie's PayPal account. She would hold it for me. When Greg checked his phone, he would see a zero balance, but he wouldn't check his phone. He was too busy digging for gold that didn't exist. I walked back to the window. The hole was getting deeper. He was waist deep in the ground now. It looked like a grave, but this time he was the one standing in it. There is something deeply satisfying about watching a man who thinks he is a king being reduced to a ditch digger. Greg spent months strutting around that house like he owned the place, drinking expensive scotch and critiquing the upholstery. Now? He was covered in mud, his hands were bleeding, and he was taking orders from the very woman he planned to murder. It turns out you don't need a whip to make a man work. You just need a lie wrapped in gold foil. By sunset, the hole was 4 feet deep and 6 feet wide. Greg looked like he had been to war. His shirt was off, hanging on a branch of the willow tree. His back was sunburnt a bright angry red. I walked out to the patio with a tray. I had made lemonade, freshly squeezed. I put a little sprig of mint in it. It was the picture of the dutiful wife supporting her hard-working husband. "How is it going, honey?" I called out. Greg stopped swinging the pickaxe. He leaned against the dirt wall of the pit, his chest heaving. He looked wild. There was dirt in his hair, dirt in his teeth. "Nothing," he wheezed. "I hit a rock the size of a Buick. I spent an hour breaking it up. There is no box, Alice." "Are you sure this is the spot?" I walked to the edge of the hole. I looked down at him. From this angle he looked small, trapped. I think so," I said, furrowing my brow. "But now that I look at it, the willow tree has grown so much in 10 years. The shadow is different." Greg scrambled up the side of the hole, slipping on the loose earth. He grabbed my wrist. His hands were gritty and rough. "What do you mean the shadow?" he demanded. "Daddy measured it by the shadow of the branch at noon," I lied. "If the branch grew, the shadow would be further out, maybe 3 feet to the left?" Greg looked at the ground 3 feet to the left. It was a patch of dense ornamental grasses. 3 feet, he muttered. He looked at the massive hole he had already dug. He looked at the untouched ground. For a second, I thought he might snap. I thought he might realize I was playing him. He gripped the handle of the pickaxe tight. But then he looked at the house. He looked at the lifestyle he wanted to keep. And he thought about the $2 million in gold bars. "Fine," he spat. 3 feet to the left. He grabbed the shovel and attacked the new patch of ground. He didn't even drink the lemonade. I went back inside and locked the door. I sat in the dark kitchen and watched him. At 9 p.m., the motion sensor floodlights clicked on. The backyard was bathed in harsh white light. Greg was still out there. He was waist deep in the second hole. I saw a movement by the fence. It was Birdie. She was wearing a nightgown and combat boots. She walked right up to the property line. Greg didn't even notice her until she spoke. "Digging for bones," Birdie cackled, her voice carrying over the fence. "Or digging for devils?" Greg threw his shovel down. "Get out of here, you old witch. Go back inside." "I hear the ground humming," Birdie screamed, pointing at him. "The metal sings. It sings." Greg froze. He looked at me through the window. I shrugged, looking helpless. "She hears metal," Greg whispered to himself. He scrambled down into the hole and started digging with his bare hands, clawing at the dirt like a dog. He thought Birdie's crazy ranting was actually confirming the gold. I texted Birdie. "Nice touch," Birdie replied. "He is an idiot. Turn on the sprinklers." I looked at the sprinkler control panel on the wall. We had a heavy-duty irrigation system. Zone 4 covered the backyard. I waited until Greg was chest-deep in the new hole. He was exhausted, dehydrated, and running on pure adrenaline. I turned the dial to Zone 4. Pesci. The sprinkler heads popped up. Jets of cold water began to arc across the yard. They sprayed directly into the hole. Greg screamed. It was a high, frustrated sound. "Alice, turn it off. The timer is broken." "Alice." I opened the back door, wearing my pajamas, rubbing my eyes. "Oh no," I cried. "I don't know how to stop it. The panel is jammed. Just come inside, Greg. It's a sign. We should stop for the night." "No," Greg roared, standing in the mud. The water was turning the clay into a sticky, heavy soup. "I am not stopping." I felt something. My shovel hit something hard. "It was probably a rock, Greg," I said. "It was metal," he insisted. "I heard it clink." He grabbed a bucket. He started bailing out the water and mud, slipping and sliding, covered in muck. He looked pathetic. He looked like a creature from a swamp. "I'm going to bed, Greg," I called out. "Don't stay up too late." I went upstairs to the master bedroom. I locked the door. I pushed a heavy chair under the handle just in case. I looked out the window one last time. Greg was down there in the mud under the floodlights, fighting the water and the earth. He was digging his own prison, shovelful by shovelful. And the best part? He thought he was winning. There is a psychological concept called the sunk cost fallacy. It is when a gambler keeps betting because he has already lost so much money he feels he cannot walk away. He thinks the next hand will fix everything. Greg was deep in the sunk cost fallacy. He had invested his sweat, his sleep, and his sanity into that hole. He couldn't stop digging because if he stopped, he would have to face the reality that he was a broke, muddy man standing in a hole for no reason. The next morning, Greg didn't go to the gym. He didn't shower. He didn't even brush his teeth. I walked into the kitchen at 8 a.m. Greg was sitting at the table. He was shirtless again. His hands were wrapped in duct tape because his palms were raw and bleeding. He was staring at a hand-drawn map of the backyard he had scribbled on a napkin. "It has to be there," he mumbled, his eyes bloodshot and rimmed with dark circles. I went down 7 feet, Alice. I hit the water table. There was no lead box. I poured myself a cup of coffee. I moved slowly, deliberately. "I've been thinking, Greg," I said softly. "I didn't sleep at all last night. I was trying to remember exactly what Daddy said." Greg's head snapped up. He looked desperate. "And? Did you remember?" I think I mixed up the azaleas with the hydrangeas," I said, biting my lip. "The hydrangeas are on the north side of the house, near the old utility easement." "The north side," Greg whispered. "That's where the ground slopes. It's harder digging." "I know," I said. "That's why he chose it. He said only a man with a strong back could get to my fortune. He wanted to make sure whoever found it earned it." It was a blatant appeal to his ego. Greg puffed out his chest, despite the exhaustion. "I have a strong back," he said. "I can do it. I need some energy drinks." "I'll go to the store," I said. "You get started." Greg grabbed the shovel. He limped out the back door. He didn't even notice that I was fully dressed, holding my purse ready to leave. I drove to the hardware store, but not for energy drinks. I met Bertie in the parking lot. She was parked in her vintage Buick, wearing sunglasses and a scarf like a spy from a bad movie. I got into her passenger seat. "How does he look?" Bertie asked. "Like a zombie," I said. "He is digging near the north wall now." Bertie cackled. She slapped the dashboard. "The north wall? Alice, you didn't." "I did," I smiled. "That's where the main sewage line runs out to the street," Bertie said, wiping a tear of laughter from her eye. "The old clay pipes from the 50s. They are brittle as eggshells." "I know," I said. "I give him 3 hours before he cracks one." "You are wicked," Bertie said admiringly. "I like it. Did you move the money?" "The joint account is empty," I said. "But I need to dissolve the life insurance policy. If he kills me tonight out of frustration, he gets nothing. But I need to do it without alerting him." "Leave that to me," Bertie said. "I have a nephew in insurance. He owes me a favor. We can put a fraud freeze on the policy. It will look like an administrative error if anyone checks, but it stops the payout dead." "Do it," I said. I drove back to the house with a case of Red Bull. When I pulled into the driveway, I heard a sound that was music to my ears. It wasn't the sound of a shovel hitting dirt. It was the sound of Greg cursing. Loud, guttural screams of rage, echoing off the brick walls of the house. I walked into the backyard. Greg was in the new hole. He was about 4 feet down. "Alice," he screamed when he saw me. "There are roots everywhere. Thick ones, I can't chop through them." "Use the saw," I called out helpfully, handing him a Red Bull. "Daddy would have used a saw." Greg snatched the drink. He cracked it open and chugged it in 3 seconds. He threw the can into the azalea bushes. "I'm going to find it," he snarled, picking up the saw. "And when I do, I'm buying a Ferrari. A red one." "Of course, honey," I said. "You deserve it." I watched him attack the roots. He was sawing directly over the sewage line. He wasn't digging for gold anymore. He was digging for disaster. There is a specific kind of justice in watching a man who thinks his excrement doesn't stink be literally covered in it. Greg was a man who spent $200 on specialized face cream. He was a man who wouldn't touch a door handle without using hand sanitizer. Watching him wrestle with a 70-year-old sewage pipe was not just revenge. It was poetry. I stood on the back porch sipping iced tea. Greg was deep in the hole near the north wall. He was fighting with what he thought was a stubborn tree root. It was thick. It was hard. And it was right where the gold was supposed to be. "I almost have it," Greg yelled, his voice echoing from the pit. "Pass me the saw." I handed him the reciprocating saw. He grabbed it with a grunt. He revved it up. The blade bit into the old clay. "Die, you stupid root," Greg screamed. He leaned his entire body weight into the saw crack. It wasn't the sound of wood snapping. It was the sound of ceramic shattering under pressure. And then came the sound of a geyser. Whoosh! A jet of dark pressurized sludge exploded from the pipe. It hit Greg directly in the chest. The force knocked him backward into the mud. But the flow didn't stop. It was the main line for the entire house, backed up with years of pressure. Greg screamed. It wasn't a scream of anger this time. It was a scream of pure abject horror. "Alice," he gurgled, scrambling to stand up in the rising tide of filth. Oh God, it's sewage." I put a hand to my mouth in mock surprise. "Oh no," I cried. "You must have hit the septic line. Daddy said the map was tricky." Greg clawed his way out of the hole. He was unrecognizable. He was covered from head to toe in brown sludge. The smell hit me a second later. It was awful. It was the smell of a lie rotting in the sun. He stood on the lawn, dripping. He was shaking with rage and humiliation. He wiped his eyes, smearing the filth across his face. "There is no gold here," he whispered. His voice was dangerously quiet. "You are lying to me, Alice. You are making me dig holes for nothing." I took a step back. The game had shifted. The fun part was over. Now I was looking at a predator who realized he was being toyed with. "I'm not lying, Greg," I said, keeping my voice trembling. Maybe I should just hire a professional crew. With an excavator, we can turn the whole yard over." "No," Greg shouted. "No crews. No witnesses." He looked at the house. He looked at me. "I'm going to take a shower," he said. "A long shower. And when I come out, Alice, we are going to have a serious talk. You are going to tell me where the money is. The real location. Or we are going to have a problem." He walked past me. He didn't care that he was tracking sewage onto the hardwood floors. He didn't care about the house anymore. I waited until I heard the shower running. I walked into the kitchen. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From adrenaline. I knew what was coming next. He was done digging. He was exhausted. His ego was shattered. He realized that finding the gold was too hard. He was going to revert to Plan A. The life insurance. He would kill me tonight. He would stage it as an accident, maybe a fall, or maybe a heart attack brought on by the stress of the renovation. Then, with the insurance money, he would hire a private crew to tear up the yard at his leisure. I looked at the wine rack. There was a bottle of expensive Cabernet that Greg had been saving for a special occasion. I saw it sitting on the counter. He had already taken it out. He had already opened it to let it breathe. Beside the bottle, hidden behind the toaster, was a small unmarked vial. He wasn't waiting for me to tell him the location. He was planning to end this tonight. I picked up the vial. It was empty. The powder was already in the wine. I smiled. "Okay, Greg," I whispered. "If you want to have a drink, let's have a drink." Poison is the coward's weapon. It is silent, it is clean, and it allows the killer to sit across the table from his victim and smile while waiting for the end. Greg was that kind of monster, but the thing about cowards is that they underestimate their opponents. They assume that because you are quiet, you are stupid. They assume that because you are a wife, you are prey. Greg came downstairs an hour later. He had scrubbed his skin raw. He smelled of bleach and expensive cologne, a desperate attempt to mask the sewage scent that seemed to be seeping out of his pores. He was wearing a fresh shirt, crisp and white. He looked like the man I married again, handsome, smooth, deadly. I was sitting in the living room. The lights were dimmed. I had put on some jazz music. Soft, relaxing. The kind of music you play at a funeral home. Alice, Greg said, walking to the bar cart. I'm sorry about earlier. I lost my temper, the heat, the stress. It got to me. It's okay, Greg, I said, watching him from the armchair. We are both tired. Let's start over, he said. He picked up the bottle of Cabernet, the one I knew was spiked. Let's just have a nice dinner. Relax? We can figure out the digging tomorrow. He poured 2 large glasses. The liquid was dark, almost black in the dim light. He swirled them. He was careful. He kept 1 glass in his left hand and 1 in his right. He knew which one was the kill shot. He walked over to me. He held out the glass in his right hand. For you, he said, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I reached for it, my hand hovered. Did you hear that? I asked suddenly, looking toward the front window. Hear what? Greg frowned. A car door, I said, and voices. It sounded like the police. Greg froze. The word police was a trigger. Paranoia washed over his face. He turned his head sharply toward the window, straining to listen. I don't hear anything, he whispered. Go check, I urged. Bertie has been calling them all week. What if she finally got them to come? Greg set both wine glasses down on the coffee table. He walked quickly to the window, pulling back the curtain to peer out into the darkness. I don't see a cruiser, he muttered. The street is empty. He was looking away for 5 seconds. That was all I needed. I reached out. I didn't tremble. I didn't hesitate. I took the glass on the right, the one he had meant for me, and switched it with the glass on the left. I sat back. I folded my hands in my lap. Greg turned back around. He looked relieved. It's nothing, he said, just the wind. You're jumpy, Alice. I guess I am, I said. He picked up the glass on the left, the one that was now filled with his own concoction. He handed me the other one. To us, Greg said, raising his glass. To finding what we are looking for. To finding what we deserve, I corrected. We clinked glasses. The sound was sharp. A bell tolling. Greg took a long, deep drink. He drained half the glass in one go. He needed the alcohol. He needed the courage. I brought the glass to my lips. I tilted it back. I kept my lips pressed tight. I didn't let a drop enter my mouth. I faked a swallow. Delicious, I said. Notes of blackberry and almond, Greg said, watching me closely. It has a distinct finish. Almond. The scent of cyanide. Or maybe just the scent of his arrogance. He sat down on the sofa opposite me. He leaned back, crossing his legs. He looked satisfied. He thought the hard part was over. He thought he just had to wait for me to drift off, call 911, and play the grieving widower. So Greg said, swirling his remaining wine. About the gold, I was thinking. Once we find it, we should travel, maybe Italy. You've always wanted to go to the Amalfi Coast. Italy sounds nice, I said. But the cliffs are dangerous, Greg. People fall. Only if they aren't careful, he smiled. He took another sip, then he frowned. He touched his temple. He blinked rapidly, as if the room had suddenly shifted out of focus. Is it hot in here? Greg asked. He loosened his collar. I feel dizzy. Maybe it's the wine, I said softly. It is a heavy vintage. Yeah, he slurred slightly. Heavy. He tried to stand up. His legs buckled. He fell back onto the sofa cushion. A look of confusion crossed his face. He looked at his hand. It was trembling. Alice, he mumbled, something is wrong. I can't feel my fingers. That's strange, I said. I stood up. I walked over to him. I stood over him, looking down. I feel perfectly fine. Greg looked up at me. His eyes were wide, panic starting to set in behind the fog of the drug. He looked at my glass, still full on the table. He looked at his empty glass. The realization hit him like a physical blow. You, he gasped. You switched them. I did, I said. Daddy always said never trust a man who pours your drink with his back to you. Greg fell off the sofa. He hit the rug with a thud that shook the coffee table. He clawed at his throat, gasping for air, his eyes bulging with the primal terror of a man who realizes he has just committed suicide by proxy. "Help me," he wheezed, his voice a ragged whisper. "Alice. Call 911. Please, I don't want to die." I sat there and watched him. I crossed my legs. I took a sip of my wine, the glass he had intended for himself, which I knew was perfectly safe because I had sanitized the entire bottle hours ago. "Why should I call them Greg?" I asked calmly. "So you can explain why you bought hydrated lime in a body bag. So you can explain why you tried to kill your wife for an insurance payout?" "I'm sorry," he sobbed, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot and the sweat. "I'll sign everything over. I'll leave, just save me." He started to convulse. His limbs jerked. He curled into a fetal position, groaning in agony. "It burns," he cried, "my stomach. It's on fire." I set my glass down. I leaned forward. "It burns because you are having a panic attack, Greg," I said. "And probably because of the massive dose of laxatives and melatonin I swapped your poison with." Greg froze. He stopped thrashing. He looked up at me from the floor, his face gray and streaked with tears. "What?" he whispered. "I found your little vial behind the toaster this morning," I explained, speaking slowly so his drugged brain could process it. "I dumped out your arsenic, or was it rat poison?" "It smelled like rat poison, and I replaced it." "You aren't dying, Greg. You are just going to be very sleepy, very confused. And you are going to spend the next few hours wishing you had a diaper." Greg blinked. The realization washed over him. He wasn't dead. He was humiliated. He tried to sit up, but the melatonin was hitting him hard. He was groggy. His motor control was shot. He slumped back against the sofa leg. You crazy bee." He started to slur. I tutted, "Be nice. I'm the only one here who isn't hallucinating." Suddenly, the room was bathed in a flashing red and blue light. It swept across the living room walls, illuminating Greg's terrified face. I stood up and walked to the window. "Oh no," I said, putting a hand to my chest. "Bertie did it. She actually did it." "Did what?" Greg slurred, trying to focus his eyes. "She called the police." I lied. "She told them she saw you burying a body." "Greg, look at the lights. They are in the driveway." It wasn't the police, it was Bertie's grandson, who worked as a DJ. He had rigged up a strobe light and a siren app on his truck parked just outside the gate. But Greg? In his state, he didn't see a DJ truck. He saw the end of his life. "Police," Greg whimpered. He tried to stand, bracing himself on the coffee table. He knocked over the wine bottle. Red wine soaked into the white rug like blood. "They are going to find the lime in the shed," I said, my voice rising in panic. "They are going to find the search history on your computer. You are going to prison for attempted murder, Greg. 20 years to life." Greg swayed. He looked like a trapped animal. "I can't go to prison," he mumbled. I'm too pretty for prison." "You need a lawyer," I said, grabbing his shoulders and shaking him. "A good one. But you are broke, Greg. You have nothing." I pointed toward the backyard, toward the dark, muddy pit. "Unless," I whispered. Greg's eyes drifted to the window, to the hole, the gold. He breathed. "It's the only way," I urged him. "If you find the box, you can bribe them. Or you can run. You can take the gold and disappear to Mexico. But you have to find it now, Greg, before they kick down the door." It was a ridiculous story. A sober man would have seen 100 holes in it. But Greg wasn't sober. He was high on sedatives, exhausted from digging, terrified of Bertie, and desperate to escape the consequences of his own greed. He looked at the front door where the police lights were flashing. He looked at the back door leading to the mud. "Mexico," he muttered. He stumbled. He fell against the wall, then pushed himself off. He lurched toward the kitchen. "I have to dig," he said, his words thick and heavy. "I have to get the box." He grabbed a flashlight from the counter. He didn't even put on shoes. He ran out the back door barefoot into the cold night air. I watched him go. He looked like a madman. He ran straight for the mud pit, jumped in, and started clawing at the earth with his bare hands, screaming at the dirt to give up its treasure. I waited until he was deep in the hole. Then I pulled out my phone. I dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? Yes, I said, making my voice shake, my husband. I think he has had a psychotic break. He is in the backyard screaming about gold and trying to bury something. I'm terrified. Please send someone. Hurry. I hung up. I walked to the back window to watch. Greg was down in the hole, waist deep in sewage and mud, flinging dirt over his shoulder, crying and laughing at the same time. The poison I gave him was working perfectly. He wasn't dying. He was losing his mind, and the real police? They were actually on their way this time. They say that rock bottom is a solid foundation to build a new life on, but for Greg, rock bottom wasn't solid. It was 6 feet of mud, sewage, and delusions. When the real police arrived, they didn't find a mastermind criminal. They found a man who had completely detached from reality. And the beautiful thing was, I didn't even have to frame him. All I had to do was hand him a shovel and let him dig his own reputation into the ground. The sirens were real this time. They cut through the suburban silence like a knife. I met the officers at the front door. I was crying, I was shaking, I was wearing my silk robe, clutching a tissue. Officer, thank God you are here, I sobbed. It is my husband, I think he took drugs. He is in the backyard. He is screaming about gold and burying bodies. The officers drew their flashlights. They moved with caution. They had heard the word bodies. We walked around the side of the house. The scene in the backyard was something out of a horror movie. The floodlights were blinding. The sprinklers were still hissing. And there in the center of the mud pit was Greg. He was unrecognizable. The sewage had dried into a crust on his skin. He was shirtless, shivering violently from the cold and the laxatives cramping his stomach. He was digging with his bare hands now, clawing at the sludge, muttering to himself. It has to be here, he gibbered. Mexico. I need to go to Mexico. Sir, the lead officer shouted, shining his beam into the hole. Step away from the shovel. Show me your hands. Greg looked up. He didn't see help. He saw his worst nightmare. His drugged brain connected the dots in all the wrong ways. He thought they were there because they knew about the poison. She switched the glasses, Greg screamed, pointing a muddy finger at me. She poisoned me. I tried to kill her, but she switched the glasses. The officers looked at each other. A confession, right out of the gate. Sir, get out of the hole, the officer commanded. No, Greg shrieked. I need the gold. Her father buried it. $2 million, I need it for the lawyer. He dove back into the mud. He started frantically throwing dirt over his shoulder, splashing the officers. He is resisting, one cop yelled. They jumped into the pit. It was a messy, chaotic struggle. Greg was slippery with slime and fueled by hysterical strength. It took 3 grown men to wrestle him down. He was kicking and screaming about hydrated lime in the shed. Check the shed, Greg roared as they cuffed him. The tarp is in the shed. I didn't use it yet. You can't arrest me if I didn't use it. One of the officers walked over to the shed. He shined his light inside. He saw the bags of lime, the heavy-duty plastic, the duct tape, the hacksaw. He walked back to me. His face was grim. Ma'am, the officer said gently, I think your husband was planning something very serious. I had no idea, I whispered, burying my face in my hands to hide the fact that I wasn't crying. I was smiling. They dragged Greg to the cruiser. He was weeping now. The adrenaline had crashed. The laxatives were taking their final humiliating toll. He left a trail of filth all the way to the police car. As they shoved him into the back seat, he locked eyes with me. He looked broken. Alice, he begged. Tell them about the gold. I walked up to the window. I leaned down so only he could hear me. There is no gold, Greg, I whispered. Daddy spent it all on hookers and blackjack in '99. But you really dug a nice hole. The look on his face, the moment the realization hit him, was worth every penny I had spent on that wedding. The flashing lights faded into the distance and silence finally returned to the cul-de-sac. It was a heavy, wet silence broken only by the sound of the sprinklers, which I finally turned off. I stood on the porch looking at the devastation. My backyard looked like a battlefield. There were mounds of clay everywhere. The azaleas were destroyed. The grass was ruined. And in the center of it all was the gaping muddy maw where my husband had tried to dig his way to a fortune that never existed. Bertie appeared at the fence a few minutes later. She wasn't wearing her crazy disguise anymore. She was wearing a silk robe and holding 2 crystal glasses and a bottle of champagne. She walked through the gate stepping carefully over the mud. "He sang like a canary, didn't he?" Bertie asked, handing me a glass. "He confessed to everything," I said, taking a sip. "He was so desperate to prove I poisoned him that he admitted he bought the lime and the tarp. He handed them the motive and the method on a silver platter." Bertie looked into the dark hole. "It is a nice hole," she mused. "Deep. It would have made a terrible koi pond." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings and quiet satisfaction. The toxicology report came back from the hospital, and it was the final nail in Greg's coffin. He had screamed that I tried to kill him with arsenic. The blood work showed high levels of melatonin and an over-the-counter laxative. The police looked at him not as a victim but as a paranoid, dangerous man who had snapped. Greg tried to backtrack. He tried to say it was all a game. But the search history on his computer was hard to explain. How to dispose of a body without smell. Non-extradition countries. Quitclaim versus lie. He was denied bail. The judge deemed him a flight risk and a danger to the community. He is currently awaiting trial for attempted murder and conspiracy. He calls me sometimes from the county jail collect. I never accept the charges. As for the $50,000 I transferred out of our joint account, I didn't keep it. I felt it was dirty money. It was money he had saved by not paying his share of the bills. It was money he thought would buy his freedom. I walked into the local women's shelter on a Tuesday afternoon. I handed the director a check for $50,000. I told her to use it for new beds. And I told her to put it in the name of Gregory Vance. I thought he would appreciate knowing that his savings were finally going to support women instead of using them. I hired a landscaping crew to fix the backyard. I told them to fill in the hole. I didn't want a pond. I didn't want a patio. I planted a weeping willow tree right where he had dug. 6 months later, I was sitting on my back porch. The new grass was coming in green and thick. The willow tree was swaying in the breeze. Bertie was sitting next to me knitting a scarf that was 3 feet too long. "You know, Alice," Bertie said, counting her stitches, "I think I see a new crack in the driveway." I laughed. I laughed until my sides hurt. "Let it crack, Bertie," I said. "I am done with fixing things, especially broken men." I took a deep breath of the fresh spring air. It smelled like flowers. It smelled like wet earth. But mostly it smelled like peace. And there you have it, ladies. Alice didn't just survive, she thrived. She took a situation that would have broken most women and turned it into a masterclass in psychological warfare. Greg thought he was the hunter, but he forgot that the lioness does the hunting while the lion just roars. He dug a hole for greed and he fell into it. And isn't that just the way the world works sometimes? The traps we set for others are usually the ones we trip over ourselves. So here is my question for you tonight. Have you ever caught someone in a lie and let them keep digging just to see how deep they would go? Have you ever played the fool just to catch the wise man? Let me know in the comments. And if you have a neighbor like Bertie, bake her a cake. She might just save your life one day. If you enjoyed watching Greg get stuck in the mud, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories. This is Mary signing off. Stay sharp, trust your gut, and never tell a man where the gold is buried.